Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news, which is going to be the first topic of discussion. There has definitely been this internal struggle for a long time now as far as just what I want these streams to be and what I'm advertising the streams to be. In that was up until this point saying Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news, and most people that are getting in the chats are only caring about the Yu-Gi-Oh! And really don't even seem like they care about me uniquely playing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's just be honest there. They just want to see somebody playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Somewhere. That's not really what I have interest or time to do. So it's probably been a long time coming. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, while a fine game, has not really evolved well enough in the 2.5 years that it's been around, and there still is just a heavy amount of grind, and it's just all kind of pointless. Like, in the 2.5 years I've been playing this game, I've never really found any real ambition to build another meta deck after going online and making the Zodiac Tri-Brigade, which still works fairly well after what feels like at least 8 months of having that meta deck, if not much longer. So the game itself is not really evolving. So yeah, I still probably want to do the solos. I still probably every now and then I'm going to jump into the dailies, but then you have events like this where I made really no progress at all with any of the loner decks, nor did I have any desire. I've missed out on this protector and I really don't care. I absolutely never care about missing out on titles. And then the main rank part just drops me down to gold, and I'm just never gonna get to that master's level. Let's just be honest here. Like I'm never gonna get to masters. I would be lucky to even get to diamond tier 1 in 1 month of playing. Now there is some hope here that I might still play Yu-Gi-Oh! As much as I have in the past, but then there is also a lot of chance that I'll just play less and just fall down further and further in rank. And yeah, I'm mostly done with Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. Now, I'm not 100% done with it. This isn't me just ending my experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! What this is me doing is rebranding and labeling more appropriately for the audience that I'm really trying to curate here and for the type of content I'm making. So going forward, starting with the next stream, all streams are just going to be labeled as video game news. I'm going to change the description. I'm going to rip out the Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff completely. There is a chance at the beginning we'll have a little bit of a warm-up and a pre-show and play one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But that's probably going to be it. If I have to take a bathroom break, I will show live streams of the Duel Lives playback of other people playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And still use that for now until I think of something better to do. And in the same vein, I will still have the Yu-Gi-Oh's background music playing, just to have some background music playing. So I am only making one major change in that Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay is going to be very minimal to almost non-existent, so if that's what people are coming from, that audience is going to have to either adapt and realize that's not what they're going to get going forward, or leave and go somewhere else. there's been just too many people, and it's not been just the same person, but it over the 2.5 years I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh, there's been too many people that straight up vocally get on the chat to say to loudly announce that they're leaving the stream as soon as they see Yu-Gi-Oh is not being played. Which that might also be a thing about the chat decorum that needs to be tweaked, where otherwise the chat decorum has kind of worked wonders. So yeah, that's my decision. There are certainly ways I could have stretched this. Like, this is episode 367. I could have tried to stretch it to 370, but that's not really going to be a clean break either. So, might as well just stop now. Yeah. Now that there's not an event going on, now that it's a new month, since today is Wednesday, May the 1st, in case I didn't say that. For the warm-up section here, yeah, there is a possibility I could have just made an interstitial screen, and it would have just been a black screen of me talking, but I figured this one game of Yu-Gi-Oh's is better than that. But yeah, for the warm-up section, I am still playing Fallout New Vegas. I've gotten a companion. It was kind of slow. I feel like all the Fallout games maybe are a little too slow to introduce companions, whereas it might just make a lot of sense to have a scripted tutorial companion with you who would then probably leave you or die after the first few tutorial missions. Which I guess technically you kind of have that, but you don't have any of the companion abilities in New Vegas. There's a character that you're hunting with and acts kind of like a companion, but doesn't have the menus and hold my stuff abilities. And as soon as I got a companion, man, I went from being overburdened with being able to carry 200 and usually being able to get my inventory only down to 150 if I clear out everything, to being able to just throw a bunch of stuff I don't want to throw away in the companion's inventory to get down to like 46 grams or whatever out of 200 grams. It should be pounds. You know, 200 grams is nothing. But yeah, the Fallout games probably should just very quickly also give you a house or a location of some sort, some really small campsite to dump items. The hoarder mentality is certainly there, and they definitely encourage it in Bethesda games too much with all the vendor trash that you can't break down into just salvage parts or raw materials. And that's definitely from the perspective I'm looking at Fallout New Vegas from. Even though I've never played the game before, it definitely is coming from a perspective of this is a very old game. It has a lot of gimmicks in it that just shouldn't exist in modern games. And yeah, I think when I get around to playing Fallout 4, that'll be very, very obvious as far as just what grindy gameplay mechanics just don't work and shouldn't exist in modern games, but still probably do exist in Fallout 4. So yeah, it was slow to get a companion. I still haven't gotten the house. There is internal lighting issues that are awful, and you basically do need a mod. At least that one mod, probably texture upgrade mods too, and anti-crashing mods too, since I've had my first crash now in Fallout 4. I mean Fallout New Vegas. But yeah, the internal lighting is incredibly dark when I look at the footage back on my older monitors. It doesn't look anywhere as dark on my newest monitor, because my newest monitor is just brighter. There's an HDR option I've decided to turn off in the PC launcher. But yeah, I'm not sure that the footage is ever going to get that good. So yeah, I'm trying to play this game without mods, but in reality I'm also making footage that is going to be very dark for a lot of people watching it, and particularly if you're just watching it on TV or if YouTube makes it even darker. The map of New Vegas seems to feel smaller, and I have yet to see anything that even indicates that there will be more than a couple of vaults. And I've seen some fairly repetitive contents that feels like it is just the exact same concepts that you would have had from Fallout 3. That being said, New Vegas still feels more interesting than trying to play Starfield. So it doesn't feel like Bethesda went in the right direction with Starfield at all. And we'll have some news about that, I think, today. Let's see. Let's see, is there anything else I've done other than play out Fallout New Vegas? I'd say probably not. I'm still in this medium emergency. It's still taking up a lot of my time. The fact that I've even been able to get to playing and making footage at all is slow progress. I may have watched like one episode of Dresden Files on Amazon Prime, and that's about it. Yeah, and I guess if I have accountability sections like that, there really is no reason to do warm-up Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing for that much, if I literally have nothing else to say. Let's go ahead and get rid of these. Yeah, already going quiet, so yeah, it's definitely time. Yeah, I think I could just win. Do this. Destroy that. And then attack. And certainly, as far as getting just like daily quests done, playing one game is not going to do that. Now what I am thinking is I'll probably play on the Steam Deck more. And try and have automations happening on my computer more often, which I have fallen behind on making YouTube shorts. And some of my YouTube shorts do feel like they've somehow not gotten any views at all, which is, yeah. I guess if that was a continuing trend, that would give me an excuse to stop making them, but that's not really a great excuse. So, yeah. I did see one cosplayer dressing as American McGee's Alice from Alice Madness Returns, and that continues to highlight how popular that series is, despite how old it is and how it is just in limbo forever and is going to be in limbo forever. It also probably highlights how there's been a real failure to make anything else that is impactful or popular. And some of that, I think, is because you had Madness Returns and the original Alice games wouldn't have had as much competition when they first came out for being a niche product for a niche audience. Nowadays, those kinds of storylines, that bizarre horror psycho type stories, are being told by independent game developers in smaller stages and more often. So there's a game, I think it might be called Withering Minds, but I'm not sure if that really is the name, that is out right now, and it's a similar experience, but it definitely just won't catch people's attention because there'll be another game. Same is true for like Scorn, even like Dante's Inferno probably suffered because its budget was too high and it was targeting too large of an audience for what it was as an old game. Unity 6 here, preview is now available. There is less reason every day that you would want to make a game in Unity. Them having a preview for boosted rendering performance, and spatial temporal post-processing and render graphing. All these things would be the things you would use to try and convince people to make their next project in Unity. And there is certainly a lot of momentum. Like, video game companies are extremely similar to other companies in that they don't want to retrain employees on new software. So if they've hired a bunch of game programmers who made a game in Unity, it often is just going to be a manager who doesn't know any better that's going to say the next game is going to be in Unity. This is an interesting visual here. And something I could see where there could be better improvement upon in many games is that very often there's just a sharp difference of what it looks like when your head is under the water versus what it looks like when your head is above the water, without that kind of reflective transition happening here. You can see on the top of the water it looks like clear water. On the bottom of the water you're getting algae green reflection. But yeah, honestly, if Unity 6 even had like a major sales point to it, which most of this seems like it probably won't have that major of a sales point. DirectX 12 backend improvements might be the major sales point, but at this point it is questionable whether you should be using DirectX at all to generate games, or should you be using an engine that is going to generate games using more OpenGL or Vulkan. It's probably Vulkan now. OpenGL, I think, is pretty dead as a technology at this point, but it never really worked great for video game style rendering. But yeah, Vulkan may very well be the technology. Although I might be saying Vulkan, and Vulkan might mean something completely different. I'm not into the technology enough to keep the technology straight as far as what they do. But yeah, I literally have just become a shill for Godot at this point, and so I can't even mention Unity without saying, why not just use the open source Godot engine? The quicker more people decide to work in Godot and program Godot in Godot, the better Godot will be. And like at some point, the difference between Godot and Unity is that had Godot been the engine for, let's just say, the past 5 years, and then people got mad at the Godot engine for some reason, you could have just forked the Godot engine because it was open source, taken all the progress of programming the Godot engine to that point, and make something different. Whereas what really happened in the past 5 years is everybody programmed in Unity, a closed source program, and as soon as people got mad at Unity, well, you can't just fork Unity, not legally anyways. You can't steal the source code and copy it. You can steal concepts to an extent that would not be copyrightable and duplicate those concepts, but that's it. So even in that hypothetical 5-year time, society and progress as far as game development goes is 5 years further behind now. And yeah, we could probably expand that kind of a example to a lot of things. Information should be free is a concept that I really do believe in. Okay, let's see. And then the next big story from, I believe this is GameDeveloper.com, is that DNA Digital Production has changed its name to Pokemon Card D Studio. Pokemon trading card game Pocket is due out in 2024. And this brings about another issue, certainly, in that there would have been a potential here, in that I would have played Yu-Gi-Oh! And played it right up until the Pokemon trading card game came out, and then if the Pokemon trading card game came out on PC, I might have considered playing that. That being said, I only have to think about that concept for a second and realize that Nintendo owns a significant portion of Pokemon, and as such, anybody trying to stream the Pokemon trading card game is likely going to run into problems, content ID claims, things like that. In fact, without knowing anything else, I can just look into my crystal ball and predict a future exactly like that. You're going to have a bunch of really young kids that want to be streamers trying to play the Pokemon card game and getting DMCA'd, takedowns, or content ID claimed, and getting really upset. Perhaps even if they are just getting content ID claims that are just tracking but not taking any of the money, if you could actually be successful on that. And inherently, the Pokemon trading card game, unless it is going to be a completely different trading card game from what is in the Western world, it can't be that interesting. Yeah. Like, particularly comparing it to Yu-Gi-Oh! 25 years of experience in Yu-Gi-Oh! With 10,000 cards, Pokemon mostly reprints the same cards over and over again. So I would imagine there's probably somewhere around 3,000 unique card names at most in the Pokemon card game, and very possibly even fewer than that. Lots of reprints, lots of different pictures of Master Ball or Trainer Bill, but the same name, same effects. I will keep an eye out for the Pokemon trading card game. I imagine little kids will love it, but yeah, it would have always been a mistake to try and switch to that. And I'm not really looking to switch at this point. I've played Hearthstone for many years, it felt like. I played Magic the Gathering for a while, at least it felt like a year there. I played Shadowverse for a couple of years, and now I've played Yu-Gi-Oh! For a couple of years. The need to play something while in the background, I think I may finally have found a way to get away from that and just start streaming. And maybe that means I'll start streaming and I'll just be a little low energy and a little bit tired sounding, but frankly I probably sound like that all the time anyways. So I'm convincing myself here as I speak that this change is well, it certainly is a long time coming, but it's ready to happen. Video Games Chronicles says a 200-pound, that's why they put it in pounds, Fallout TV show backpack is available for pre-order. You would be a complete sucker to buy this. This is nothing. Certainly not $200 worth of even fabric. It would have to have some kind of brand name on it, first of all, hidden away for it to be worth $200, but even at that, this is ridiculous. And it's important to point out, in the Fallout TV series, you like see her wearing this backpack in the first episode, and then you never really see it again. It's not an important thing at all. You see the Brotherhood of Steel guys, or apprentice or serf, carrying around a bigger bag. But yeah, this is again an example of Video Games Chronicle choosing to be a shill for the Amazon Fallout TV show and some highly overpriced merch, just so they can have yet another article with Fallout in the name. Which, yeah, I would suggest be more creative about it. Now would be a much better time for video game websites to do retrospectives or even reprint their reviews of old Fallout games and revisit their old reviews of old Fallout games. Talk about the games themselves, talk about the content you've made in the past about them. Don't just chill a 200-pound backpack, $200 backpack. And at the very least, I am actually playing Fallout New Vegas. I could have certainly tried to be a shill and cheap about it and then just made a very quick video talking about Fallout New Vegas, even though I hadn't played the game. That would be very dishonest to do it that way, but that would be something. Oh, speaking of YouTube videos, I did see Video Game Donkey made a comedic coverage of all the games who have characters who have amnesia. The problem with his videos, it's way too long. It needed to be the concept is good, the editing is bad, and so halfway through the video I was like, alright, I get the joke. He's just naming every single game that has a character that has amnesia in it and how much the amnesia trope has been used. The amnesia trope, though, is actually a pretty good trope, so I don't want to see it really go away in games. It's not being used that often these days. Anyways, it was used a lot more in the past. Your character in Fallout New Vegas has amnesia after being shot in the head, which makes me wonder if it isn't a case where your character in New Vegas might be a synth, and that the doctor either didn't notice you were a synthetic robot, or was in on it all along. But yeah. Yeah, that's my thought there. But it may very well be that Synths just don't show up in New Vegas at all. And that would just be an interesting twist. Here we have basically the same story. The Pokemon Company announces a new subsidiary, Pokemon D Studio, called D Studio Limited, which Video Games Chronicles is saying it's a brand new subsidiary, whereas GameDeveloper.com said said it's a whole new subsidiary. So seems like somebody got it wrong there. Not that it really matters much. Let's see. A company called Resolution has appointed Johan Gastren as CTO, Chief Technical Officer, to expand into spatial computing, usher in a new phase of the industry. Spatial computing, I think, means augmented reality and VR. Apparently Resolution is known for working on VR and AR titles like Demeo, Racket Club, Angry Birds VR, Isle of Pigs, and Game Room. The latter was ported to the Apple Vision Pro. So yeah, that's AR and VR, so that's not even really big news as far as I'm concerned, because I really don't have any faith in VR and AR to ever be a thing. Helldivers 2 already ranks 7th in lifetime US dollar sales for a Sony published game, which I don't know if there's anything to really take from that that's surprising. Helldivers 2 is doing incredibly well, despite there being a small controversy I really haven't covered, in that the players were promised that a bunch of guns were going to be improved, and then a few of the guns might be nerfed, and then the players definitely feel like most of the guns have been nerfed. But yeah, Helldivers 2 for me is very much an outside looking in experience, so we really don't have too much to say around it. Let's see. This list here is probably not a very accurate list, because I doubt Sony is really listing its information as far as PlayStation disc sales go. And then if you think about like PlayStation sales for games they've published recently, yeah, it would be a struggle to find 7 other games that you can mention. You're going to mention Horizon. I think that was published by PlayStation. Spider-Man, I think, was published by PlayStation. Last of Us was definitely published by PlayStation. Last of Us 2. Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man Miles Morales. Horizon Zero Dawn. But yeah, of all the recent games, that's pretty much it. Then you start getting back into like Uncharted games, and then you start in my mind, I can't think of anything else until you start thinking about PlayStation 3 games at that point. I heard someone compare Steam Deck's power to the power of playing a PlayStation 4 game or a PlayStation 4 console. And I took that a little roughly, probably more than you really should, because in fairness, if you had a portable PlayStation 4, you would be very happy with that performance, particularly since the Steam Deck is only going to 800, 1280 by 800 in the resolutions. But in my heart, I would definitely prefer the comparisons to be that the Steam Deck is as good, if not better, than an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5 and even perhaps a PlayStation 5 Pro. Although in this comparison it was DF Retro specifically talking about ray tracing, and generally speaking I think ray tracing is just not ready for prime time. We will undoubtedly see it become a very standard feature in either this generation or the next generation's consoles and games and graphics cards, but right now it is a little too complicated and a little too power hungry to see it. I don't expect that the next Nintendo Switch is going to be a powerhouse on ray tracing either, and there's just been so many other tricks that do something almost as good as ray tracing that have already been developed. I think a lot of times you're going to see games do that instead of using ray tracing. Another Batman game has been announced, this time Batman Arkham Shadow for VR is coming in late 2024, which is being made by Oculus Studios and Camouflage, which I've never heard of that company. I assume this would be Warner Brothers licensing out Batman, in the sense that AT&T owns Warner Brothers and DC, to perhaps dip their toes into what they need to do, which is make a new Batman game that is not part of the Arkham series and is going to go in a different direction. And they can't go in too many directions because they're not willing to do a silly Batman 86 blue costume Batman character, that unless it's a kids game. They might do it then. So they still want that Dark Knight Batman black outfit, dark and brooding Batman. And yeah, I don't know if they really have any other options. What they could do, certainly, is they could try and tell more recent stories of Batman's where it's the Bat family and you have several Robins that are younger kids that are hanging around with Batman and playing a role, and not just a bunch of 20-year-olds or edgelord 18-year-old teenagers. You could certainly have a Batman that is younger and experiencing a better life instead of just the dark, alone, brooding Batman, and try and set a little bit of a different experience there. But Warner Brothers can't do nothing with Batman. They need to make Batman movies kind of constantly. They need to make Batman video games kind of constantly. Otherwise, AT&T is just not profiting enough to justify funding Warner Brothers movies and Warner Brothers themselves, Warner Brothers games. I guess AT&T could just sit on them and do nothing for a while, and many fans would probably agree with that concept. But DC Comics in particular have to put out Batman comics, so they have to do something. We've already been promised a whole Justice League Trinity series, and we haven't seen any of that in the movies. So video games are going to have to dance around that. I did see a YouTuber talking about, there's this YouTuber, I think his name is Legacy Killer something. He does a series of Death of a Game, games that have just died, and he covered Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and yeah, that game is pretty dead at this point. There's no reason to really talk about it, and there's not been any kind of second wind to convince people that it was worth playing. So Rand Miller, the guy who runs Cyan, the makers of Myst, retweeted Jordan Mechner. He was the creator of Prince of Persia, and apparently he has written and drawn a graphic novel called Replay that tells the story of his 4 decades making games and the story of his family. And I guess you have to get it from his website completely. the graphic novel. It is interesting, certainly, to I don't remember Jordan McNair looking like that, but whatever. It's interesting that we are in this modern time in which people are allowed to communicate pictorially a lot more. Back in the day, illiterate Egyptians would have used hieroglyphs and pictures to communicate, and cavemen would have. But with the revolution of the printing press and the English language, there was so much of a forcing of all society to use letters and English, specifically the British Empire forcing English on everybody, that the idea of some people being better at expressing themselves through pictures really died out. Yes, you did have artists that would spend months painting an individual art, but it was never quick. It's not like it is now, where people who are more artistic can speak through memes somewhat, communicate somewhat through memes or emojis, and it definitely is a fairly recent thing in the past 100 years or so that we've started to see people being able to express their ideas in comic book or graphic novel form. Like the phrase graphic novel in itself, non-existent even maybe 50 years ago. And that's a lot to do with just Japanese influence and Japanese graphic novels existing. And yes, of course, Asians have the Asian characters are based on pictures even now, so there's more of a pictorial thinking even when you are writing Japanese characters and symbols than when writing English letters. But yeah, it is probably only been in the past 10 years that somebody would be respected by communicating in this fashion. And even now, even today in 2024, the fact that he has made a graphic novel really telling his life story is fairly strange, but it's definitely a good thing too. Like we should see more of that. If more people can tell their tale, their life story, and what is important and what they're passionate about in a way that they are best comfortable, that's a better thing. It goes right up into the issue of like educating in schools, where very often you would have very special needs students who had a lot of special needs just trying to be crammed into doing school work and learning the same way as everybody else, and it's just not working. And so the good things is most schools these days work very hard to recognize what is the best way to educate somebody with special needs and accommodating their special needs, and actually frankly going over above and beyond just accommodating special needs, but creating an environment that is most conducive to learning, not just saying, well, this person has special needs, so we'll do the bare minimum to accommodate that. Speaking of accommodating special needs, this isn't so much a video game thing, but it does involve a Nintendo Switch. There was a story several months ago of a special needs student who seems like a lot of these special needs students have hormonal things that make them grow very big and strong compared to kids of their same age. So this special needs student, who is about 6 feet tall in I think junior high, and big and strong, was given special permission to have a Nintendo Switch and play it as a self-soothing form of entertainment when after he's done all of his work. So there had been an agreement, and he was aware of the agreement. A substitute teacher came in and was unaware of the agreement and decided that she was going to take away the Switch from him. And yeah, he did not react positively to that, and he physically assaulted this special needs student. That there has been a lot of talk about how those kinds of students probably should not be in the same kind of schools, and it almost certainly it is a case that there are a lack of funding is being spent to make special needs schools for the extreme cases, or perhaps an overemphasis in having special needs students in the regular classes, which often almost never really works well for either side. But yeah, the follow-up to this story, where a lot of people were against the special needs person, which in fairness he did violate social norms by assaulting somebody just because they took away his Nintendo Switch, but in fairness, plenty of kids have done that. Plenty of like 8-year-olds have thrown fits and kicked and screamed and punched their parents. The only difference there is they don't have hormonal things in which they're 6 foot and very strong and actually capable of hurting an adult. And yeah, the follow-up to this is now that this special needs student has been arrested and put in some kind of care. I'd hope it wasn't just general pop prison, but maybe. He is now counter-suing effectively school system for not meeting his needs, which it sounds like, to get to that situation, he's probably right. His lawyers are probably making this suit, but it seems like that is right. And I think if you talk to your average parents of special needs kids, they would say most schools are not doing enough to meet the needs of their child. So yeah, I obviously have perhaps a little bit more sympathy for that, having had the advantage of seeing some of that even when I was in school, and how bad public schools can be around how it treated some of their special needs students. So yeah, obviously he shouldn't be violent and shouldn't be punching people, beating up people, and pretty obviously he should have been in a special classroom with special teachers who were better trained, and not just some random substitute teacher showing up. But yeah, my main message here, and this again only has a little to do with video games because a Nintendo Switch was involved, is don't immediately react too strongly to a lot of these news stories. That's probably good advice always. Mostly I only talk about video games anyway, so part of the reason why I talk about video games and video game news is to not get into more sensational stories. So on that, let's move on. Bethesda Game Studios has been tweeting up quite a few things, none of which really are making me fall in love with Bethesda by any means. It feels like, yes, they are putting out patches, but then they have like happy 22 years of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, never in vain, so I wonder if that is actually DLC for Morrowind, or if this is just some near a very I don't even know what that is, whether that's DLC for Morrowind or if that's some word in Morrowind. But very noticeably, while 22 is not a round number, remakes for Morrowind should have already been released. It would have been an easy decision just in between the gap, like halfway between the massive gap between what would have been Fallout 3 or Skyrim. I think Skyrim came out after Fallout 3. Yeah. Halfway in that massive gap between Skyrim and Fallout 4. They should have realized that they were taking way too long to make games, and they should have gotten another company to just remake Morrowind. That makes a lot of sense. And frankly, it could have just been a remaster of Morrowind. They took way too long to even remaster Skyrim. There should be remakes in development in parallel right now for Elder Scrolls 1, 2, and 3. Skyrim, probably not. But everything else should be considered either to have remakes, just full-on remakes. If their Gamebryo engine or whatever engine they actually are using, I think it's the Gamebryo engine, was that good, they would want to show it off and hire some other company to use their engine to remake those games. Yeah, and then they're talking about Fallout 4 update, which includes a new quality and performance modes on consoles, I would assume, and maybe slight improvements on PC, widescreen support, and 3 free Creation Club content packs for all players, which is probably very minimal content packs. Let's see. And then there was major confusion as far as just the PlayStation Plus Extra members. And then there's a follow-up. Thanks for letting us know that the PlayStation Plus members are unable to access the free next generation update. The issue apparently has now successfully been resolved. But yeah, this should all be good news, and instead it's just, hey, this doesn't work, and this kind of works. There's just bad promotion here, and some of that probably should fall on Microsoft themselves. And like, Microsoft needs to step in and say, we're going to have one publisher who's actually good at promoting game announcements. When we see ID at Xbox events, there's no confusion really around that. When we see other games from other companies owned by Microsoft being announced, there's no confusion there. So Microsoft needs to recognize that ZeniMax as a publisher is not really as good as it should be, and probably just lay off all those people. Like, the best thing Microsoft could do, I think, to make Bethesda players, Fallout players, Skyrim players happy, would be to lay off everybody at ZeniMax, because there's just utter distaste for ZeniMax. There's nothing positive around that name. Even just changing the name would be a good thought. Yeah. And here's a Fallout 76 promotion with over 1 million dwellers in the online game. But the picture here looks way more like a Fallout Shelter image than Fallout 76. So that's another example of just confusion. Skimming this looks like some kind of extra reward that they were giving the Fallout Shelter players. But no, this is Fallout 76, which doesn't look anything like that. Yep. Even the cross-promotion with the TV series is confused, to say the least. Yeah. We can kind of scroll back all the way through April and see that the best they were doing was like in April 18th, when they're just retweeting the Fallout TV show. Yeah. And I think it is probably the case for Todd. Now would be the perfect time, frankly, for Todd Howard to just straight up retire. That would make a lot of sense. And see, when I see this commissioned art, this still is very obviously the Fallout TV series because of the characters. Although the art style is actually fairly off on what the show looked like, but still very recognizable. Right, so yeah, they added some of those characters from Fallout 4 to Fallout Shelter. I have to say though that this official art really does just make the black character look like a generic black character, and this art also I just don't feel like animators are that good at matching the face. They're probably not doing a great job on the other characters either, although a ghoul is going to look close enough. But once you have real actors trying to depict them, yeah, that's nowhere close matching either for the commissioned art, and I don't think that's anywhere close for those characters either. Yeah, you really run into that problem once you introduce live action characters. It would probably be better to just 3D scan the characters into the game or have live action in the game. This is also one thing that I would say about Fallout New Vegas in comparison is because you don't come out of a vault in New Vegas, you don't get a very cinematic intro of what you see. You just see a small village and some desert at the beginning of New Vegas. There is no megaton city that you can immediately visit, although New Vegas does seem like it's not that far away from where you start, so maybe you are just supposed to fly over to New Vegas earlier. But as far as I can tell, I think the story wants you to go all the way around the map and enter New Vegas from a back door, effectively. The story isn't in Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout games in general don't tend to hold your hand and force you to go in specific directions, but they do tend to want to point you in specific directions to give a somewhat consistent experience. Starfield has a Shattered Space story expansion launching this fall. Ahead of that, the game's next update will include shipbuilding and city map features, city map features should have been in the game from the beginning. Shipbuilding probably too. As I'm playing Fallout New Vegas, it's just more solidifying the idea that Starfield just doesn't need to exist. At a certain point, I really question why they didn't just set Starfield in the Fallout universe and just say, hey, the Enclave made some rocket ships and a large percentage of people did escape before the war into space, and so it's still going to have that Fallout nuka-punk feeling somewhat, but it's going to evolve into more of a space punk feeling, and then there would be a bunch of planets instead of vaults. I mean, you could shift it just a little bit so it's more connected to the Fallout universe and has more of that feeling, whereas Starfield just feels too serious. Even Skyrim feels a little too serious, and I'm not sure any of these games need to feel serious the way they're designed and the way they play. But yeah, we always want to look for positive outcomes around games, so I would say we should just hope that maybe the Shattered Space story expansion does fix Starfield in some way and make it more of an experience. And if you were to compare feature to feature in Starfield, a lot of the features along landing on planets and then just basically having randomly generated encounters on those planets really scream that the procedural generated style of Bethesda games, the way they're being developed now, does not appeal to a modern gamer. We want very much bespoke, scripted, artistically created experiences. If I'm going to land on a planet, I want that entire planet to feel like it's an important planet. I don't want to just randomly land on planets. If anything, it's like Minecraft is about the only game where procedurally generated experiences make sense, and even in that, I feel like there are better experiences in Minecraft when you have somebody making a bespoke map leading you in specific directions. I haven't played personally bespoke custom made adventure maps, but I played similar captive maps that are effectively the experience of Minecraft in a very small custom made map, and that is a little bit more interesting. Now, the randomly generated element for Minecraft works after you've done all the bespoke custom made content, certainly, but that it shouldn't be the main focus. If Starfield was very much a scripted experience for the first 60 hours, then you get to the credits, then the universe resets, and it is just then procedurally generated randomness, that might work. That would be about the way I think you could best do an experience like that, and that only really works if the core gameplay mechanics make sense. If the running, the gunning, the resource gathering work. In Fallout New Vegas, a lot of that doesn't work. There's a lot of places in the desert you can wander where you're just going to pick up very small ingredients that you could potentially cook, but you're probably not going to. You're probably just going to shoot people and steal their guns and armor and sell that for caps. And playing on very easy like I am, you just don't need food, you just don't need to drink the sunset sarsaparillas, which I realize that there's a whole script there where you need to drink all of them to get the blue star caps under sunset sarsaparillas and collect as many of those as you can for a treasure. And so in the main game, if you aren't playing on very easy, you would be getting thirsty in the desert fairly common, and so you would be drinking the sunset sarsaparillas even more than you would be drinking Nuka-Colas to address your thirst. But because I'm playing on very easy, that's never an issue. You just have a cantina that's bottomless that fills your thirst up instead. So yeah, there's an entire gameplay mechanic that you skip in very easy, and the bullet scarcity on very easy is not anywhere as bad as I imagine it would be on normal, but it still makes a lot of sense since I want to kind of rush through New Vegas to play Fallout 4 in a reasonable amount of time afterwards. It makes a lot of sense to play the game on very easy and just miss out on those resource management games, gameplay mechanics. And the same is true for Starfield. Is if I was going to play Starfield, I'd probably try and play it on very easy and miss out on a bunch of the resource management mini-game concepts, which is just not what people want. Almost all games are run and gunners, mostly, if not completely, because running and gunning is a high-action, interesting experience, whereas cooking food and monitoring your thirst levels and your health levels is all fairly boring. Even if you were playing a tabletop Dungeons and Dragons style role-playing game in the real world, it would be very annoying if the dungeon master goes, "You are now thirsty again. You must drink again. You must find some food to cook, to eat, to restore your health." That's just not the creative narrative storytelling experience that a good dungeon master would encourage. You might do it once, but that's it. So what RPG games, particularly from Bethesda, are trying to emulate is not even accurate to what I think a good dungeon Dungeons and Dragons style tabletop gameplay experience would be. Moving on. Let's see. We already talked about this. Roblox teams with Walmart on a real-life e-commerce store within its platform. Roblox is hoping Walmart and other retailers will bring their stores to its platform so it can become a one-stop destination for Generation Z players. Basically having people put their money into Roblox as Robux and then taking their money out sometimes as Robux to purchase actual things that would be shipped and delivered, I imagine, at Walmart. Although it might be a case that you can literally walk into a Walmart and swipe some kind of Roblox debit card, sign in to your Roblox account to pay with that. It's company script nonsense and should be illegal. I think technically is illegal, but they're going to try it anyways. A lot of people do a lot of illegal things, and it's until the government tells them, hey, we've noticed you're doing something illegal, that they actually stop. But it's also very scary, and it would be yet another reason why I would justify not having your kids play Roblox, regardless of how much they like it. And we need to be hyper vigilant as gamers in particular around video games that are targeting children, or that look like they're made for children, or that children in general just are highly interested. It might very well be a case where somebody makes a game for adults and it just becomes super popular amongst children, and at that point the game developer still has a responsibility to society to not try and exploit their player base, which would now be children. And Roblox is doing the exact opposite of that. It's immoral, in my opinion, and that's strong words, but almost certainly the right words. Pop Reach Games India studio has been acquired by Phoenix Game. This was a $9.8 million deal that gives Phoenix new games and properties to play with, while Pop Reach gets to now focus on its core responsibilities. One of their games was the Smurfs Magic Match, which I believe was a mobile game. This is from GameDeveloper.com. Let's see. Todd Howard, in an interview, says Bethesda is focused on finding ways to increase its output. The company hasn't ruled out partnering with external developers on future games. Although inherently, this sub-headlining just highlights the truth in the lie. The company has not ruled out partnering with external developers. At this point, it should be the company has already partnered with several external developers, and the fact that they haven't done that just shows that they are too far behind, and that they're making excuses here, saying they're finding ways to increase their output. Why not just say they're focused on increasing its output instead of being focused on finding ways? Todd Howard almost certainly is a linchpin to the problem of Bethesda, in that it is an ego thing at Bethesda, and the ego definitely hasn't been shot down by Todd Howard, and it's probably being fed by Todd Howard to the point that Bethesda wants to really be the only people making these Bethesda style games, which would be fine if they could do it in a reasonable amount of time, but they can't, and they've proven that probably a decade ago. And yeah, these kind of decisions need to be taken out of the hands of Todd Howard. Microsoft definitely has a lesson that they need to learn here too, is that if they're going to acquire some company, when you have these rock star personalities that feel like that have been elevated by the gamer base far too much and feel like they are just genius savant game developers, you probably need to put them out to pasture and just say, you're just going to be a figurehead now. You're not actually going to be making any decisions. because if a company is doing so poorly that Microsoft can acquire it, then they need to actually make changes, and Microsoft has been incredibly poor. They haven't done that with any of the companies that they've acquired, and so they have almost certainly wasted money and lost money by not putting the companies they've acquired to work at making more games, making better games, making different games, getting all of the companies perhaps using the same engines so that different departments and different companies will communicate and work with each other and can help each other. I heavily suspect that there is no way for anybody who works at Activision Blizzard to get together and have a cup of coffee and talk or help any employee at Bethesda. I imagine they're all at completely different offices. I imagine they never get together. They never communicate. I imagine they don't have email access to each other. And there almost certainly would be ways to mix and match some things and have new teams form out of a group of employees who maybe are a little tired of working on certain kinds of games or working with certain other people. But yeah, these are pretty much excuses, is all I can take that as. And really, Todd Howard is in a very bad position because the only thing he can do to make me happy or the gaming community in general happy is either announce his retirement and then hand it over to somebody else to be in charge, and then the timer would reset and give a little bit more time, or just announce a new game coming out, and it basically has to be a Skyrim Elder Scrolls game or some kind of Fallout game that maybe is a spin-off that is slightly interesting, but that's about all he could do. If he announced a new Starfield, nobody would be interested. If he announced a brand new game that is not connected to any of the universe, nobody would be interested. So really, Todd Howard would be better just staying silent at the moment, since he has nothing really new to say. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a new Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer map has been showcased. The first episode of Knuckles' TV show was apparently available on YouTube for free. Seems like it has been taken down since then. A lot of these are old things I had up from the last stream because the last stream ended fairly shortly. Today may also end fairly shortly, but not really. Like, all the news I'm talking about right now, the big news, still has gone over an hour. And even with only playing one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! This would have been probably a 4-hour stream otherwise. Screen Australia, according to GameDeveloper.com, has launched a new fund to support game festivals and events. I would definitely hope that would work. Each festival can request up to $100,000 from a government-backed funding body. Remember, there's a lot of censorship in Australia, so having game events might help convince the government to stop doing so much censorship. Maybe. Although, who knows if that really would happen. $100,000 for a event, though, also may not be that much. Yeah. When you think about renting out a convention center and perhaps having to pay for the cleaning of the convention center and then promotion of an event, $100,000, I could see blowing through that fairly easily. Although I think you could probably pull off a decent event that way. And events that wildly vary, because you could very much have an event in a parking lot for just a few $100s worth of posters and advertisements and all digital promotion that's super cheap or free, and have 10 people show up. Or you could try to have a real major experience that wouldn't be as big as Comic-Con, but would be large enough. There's also, I guess, a question about having events in general and whether gamers really need those kinds of events. And maybe I have no idea as far as what the situation is as far as sickness spreading goes in Australia, because even pre-COVID, con flu was constantly an issue as far as every single convention, as people would get together and share germs and get sick from it. And so there's definitely a disadvantage of those kinds of events. Overall, though, I would say smaller events in more locations, particularly in the United States, would be preferable, instead of one giant E3 in Vegas once per year. Having several different events in several different states is preferable, although a lot of that is unlikely to actually happen. I don't think we're going to have many E3s happening in the middle of like Oklahoma or Colorado or something like that. There's just some locations where conventions are never really going to bother to try and be, or they just won't have the full blessing of like the ESA or Microsoft or Sony or anything like that. So it will be some kind of small event run by some local fan. So moving on, GameDeveloper.com says a pop culture mashup game, Funko Fusion, is getting a September release date. As far as I can tell, this is some kind of Funko Pop game, but there's some kind of fusion element to it. I'm seeing dinosaurs with Funko Pop heads, and I'm seeing a Back to the Future town square. And is this supposed to be the thing? So those I think would all be Universal Pictures movies. Starbuck. Now I will say, in video game form, the Funko Pops look just a tiny small bit better than in the real world plastic form. But I still personally feel like Funko Pops are incredibly stupid looking and have just no reason to exist and look that way. It is definitely stylizing and branding yourself over everything else. But I'm clearly somewhat wrong there, because there are just a lot of people who seem to really, really like it. And yeah, there's a decent number of licenses there, but I am not sure what the actual gameplay is on that. I'm not sure that the game itself, the digital game here, isn't just trying to promote people buying more Funko Pops. Yeah, it definitely is not a game for me, but I do think that there is probably an audience out there. It may not be a big enough audience. GameDeveloper.com says the Deliver Us Mars studio, Kyokin, is laying off the development team. I think this is almost everybody at the company has been laid off, or there's another story where the entire company has shuttered. The company now hopes to use Kickstarter to fund a third entry in the Deliver Us franchise and rebuild brick by brick. Well, I don't know why you would support a Kickstarter for a company that just laid off everybody who was involved in making the games you liked. Like, why not instead save your money and fund the people who had been laid off either through Patreon or a Kickstarter if they form a new company? It does seem to me like we are starting to see the beginnings of a bubble bursting around video game development. Unfortunately, it's going to seemingly affect the smaller companies first, and it may take a much longer time before you see the likes of Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft starting to slim down and not overspend and overdevelop games, making them too expensive and too big. But yeah, more bad news. Stellar Blade, here's some good news, has 2024's highest Metacritic user score so far. It beats Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Persona 3 Reload to the top spot. User score of 9.2 with 1,899 ratings. I would question here as far as what the review score on Metacritic would be. So we'll click on that. And I think, is that going to actually do anything? It's worth pointing out that I started to watch Jeff Gerstmann talk about Stellar Blade, and he absolutely hates it and the way it plays. At least that's what he's saying, is that he hates the way it plays. Which I think may very well just highlight that Jeff Gerstmann, as an actual game reviewer, as an actual gamer, is not in line with your average gamer. Which, yeah, there are just people that are not going to be in line with your average gamer and just don't relate. And that's fine, unless those people want to be video game critics, at which point you're going to have to work your way past that and not just call things terrible and garbage, which inherently, even when Jeff Gerstmann was with a Giant Bomb, that increasingly was the way they would refer to games, with non-descriptive insult terms instead of trying to be better journalists and highlight what they're disliking and why they dislike it. Jeff Gerstmann is disliking the lag that is in the defend animation, even though it seems like the case is, as soon as you hit the defend button, you are defending and you won't take damage. The animation just takes longer to be more visually appealing. And Jeff Gerstmann doesn't like that. He wants a game to react visually to whatever he's doing instantaneously, even if it would look worse because of that, which that is probably a very fighting game mentality thought. But yeah, Stellar Blade in general, not just for Jeff Gerstmann, is going to be an example game to check out, to see who are the critics that are either anti-Stellar Blade because it's an Asian game, Korean game, or anti-Stellar Blade because it has lewd imagery. I saw somebody made a YouTube video asking people what they thought of the Stellar Blade visuals on the streets of New York, and I'm sure they cherry-picked the responses, but there definitely were people saying she didn't look Asian enough, when she looks exactly like the Asian model it's based after, or almost exactly like. I won't say exactly like. There's a lot of people saying she looks like she's 13 or something, or too young, and the Asian model is not that young also. And I would disagree with that wholeheartedly. There's nothing about that long hair in her face that says this is a young looking Asian person. Asians just tend to not look incredibly ragged and old like white people do, but looking at her height, looking at her hair length, you're easily talking a 20-year-old plus age. And it should be pretty obvious there, like with the tight skin, with the tight outfits, that she's not underage, really. She's not coming anywhere close to that. But yeah. What I would want to do here, I'm not going to watch this entire trailer. This trailer is showing a lot of cutscenes, but perhaps not enough gameplay. But I think that may be really more of what the game is that there's a decent amount of cutscenes in between encounters, and that there is less just grinding. But yeah, what I want to do here, I'm taking a really long time here, is let's just see all reviews. There are no negative reviews even for critical, but the worst reviews here, like New Game Network, I believe, was the one that disingenuously broke the hard R claim, the graffiti randomly being placed. Then you have GLHF for Sports Illustrated. Why are they even reviewing a video game? But yeah, it seems like even the people who really don't want to review it well are still having to review it fairly highly. A 7 out of 10. Although inherently there is something that needs to be said there too, is that there should be a case where if these people don't like the game, whether their dislike is genuine and honest or not, they still should feel more open to review the game as a 50 or as a 0 if they want to give it a 0 score whatsoever. There's a fairly high number of 100s. But also, it's worth pointing out that looking at these reviews means nothing to me and should mean nothing to most gamers. Most of these websites we've never even heard of and probably shouldn't be considered. When you're getting GamePro Germany being separated out of GamePro US, there's an unfair advantage for GamePro. Or when you're getting comicbook.com to review a video game, that seems inappropriate also. IGN's doing it even worse, I think. And I would have to just assume that IGN has one review that they hand to multiple people to rewrite up, or one score. Well, anyways, the big story here is that Stellar Blade has the highest Metacritic user score so far, which so far maybe not necessary in the headline. It is very possible Stellar Blade will have the highest Metacritic score for the entire year, because we're not really anticipating much more this year. I can't even tell you, now that Stellar Blade has been released, what the next big thing would be. Unless they're going to rush out a Call of Duty or Gears of War game, which we know Microsoft is going to do some kind of presentation. Manor Lords is topped 1 million sales after netting 3.2 million wishlists, according to GameDeveloper.com. And it does feel like Manor Lords might be a fairly popular and fairly successful real-time strategy game. That being said, I'm not expecting any kind of real-time strategy game to become a major, highly reviewed game played by your average gamer. You have to be a real-time strategy fan and a farming simulator, city simulator fan to really get into these types of games. Another Crab's Treasure ends its opening week with 100,000 units sold. I suspect another Crab's Treasure may not get any more press coverage, though. It may have a somewhat strong week, but I don't think it has enough momentum to have something more to be at like 200,000 units by next week. Diablo 4 Season 4 Loot Reborn overhauls many of the core game systems, according to Video Games Chronicle, which, okay. New itemization systems, Helltide changes, and much more. The problem still with Diablo 4 is that you would have to just get rid of the seasonality and make it a single player game, much like the previous Diablo games, before I'd even begin to consider touching it. And even then, I'm not sure if there's a real motivation to do that, because I would be much happier with just remakes and re-releases of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 instead of Diablo 4. And that's another example of where if they just made the story events and the encounters of Diablo 1 in the engine of Diablo 4, that would probably satisfy a audience a lot better. We already talked about Funko Fusion launching September 13th. It's coming for the PS4 and 5, Xbox Switch, Xbox Series, and Switch and PC. It doesn't really make the most sense. Like Jurassic World, I think kids know, but the original Battlestar Galactica, people don't know that. And I can't even read this logo. This is Hot Fuzz, which, yeah, that's not really super kid friendly. And then The Mummy is a pretty old movie, but I imagine kids know that. So I'm questioning where the fandom is here, or who they're targeting. Nope was like a movie that I imagine a lot of people didn't see. Back to the Future. Kids may not really know that either. Walking Dead's not really kid friendly. And then Five Nights at Freddy characters. So it does just kind of feel like it is all over the place as a game. I cannot tell who they're really targeting there. I don't think they're targeting kids. I think they're targeting parents of kids at most, or adults in general. Invincible. One of the problems with Invincible comic series is the Invincible TV series is already bloody and violent, and I think it is probably going to get even more mature as it goes further into the comic. And so, yeah, there is this thought of trying to make Invincible kid friendly, but he really isn't. Same is probably true with like the Umbrella Academy. A lot of this is just Universal Picture Studios, things that Universal owns, and clearly they just wanted to get some license money and didn't really care how their properties would be used. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says Amazon says Fallout has attracted 65 million viewers in just over 2 weeks. This is the most watched release since The Lord of the Rings of Power. And yeah, it's a little surprising there, but it feels like Fallout may be the breakout hit for Amazon Prime TV. And one would hope that they would not take too much from that. the best thing I think they could probably do is figure out who greenlit Fallout on Amazon Prime and put them in charge of Amazon Prime, because last I heard there was basically 2 people in charge of Amazon Prime, and that has led to really poor management, and just people not knowing who the boss really is, and not knowing and not having a consistent vision as far as what Amazon Prime even wants to be. So just having a visionary in charge could be the best thing that they could do from this outcome. The worst thing they could do is greenlight 5 seasons of Fallout plus 3 spin-offs of Fallout and just become Fallout all the time, or go too deep into licensing other video games so that we would have like terrible video games to live action coverage, because there is still a high chance of failure. We've seen a couple of successes, but we've seen major failures too. There could be an interesting twist here where they licensed out the Witcher video game series and made a Witcher live action, and hired Henry Cavill, who played the Witcher, to play the Witcher in Witcher based off of the video game for Amazon Prime, directly competing against the Witcher series that is ending on Netflix. That would be an interesting way to compete. But I don't know what else they can do. They could probably license a Borderlands TV series. I'm not sure how long a Borderlands TV series could go. They probably would want to wait till the movie was out to see if that succeeded. An Assassin's Creed TV series wouldn't be terrible. If I went down the list of all popular video games, I'm sure you could find quite a few of them, but that's not really what I want to see Amazon do. I want to see them also just fund making other new content and keeping it varied, and making it more varied. That was one thing Netflix did right in its early days, is that they didn't just focus on making Friends clones and trying to get people to watch The Office or Friends like shows instead of just watching reruns of The Office or Friends. They went and got Korean shows, they licensed some animes, they experimented. Certainly their Food Network competition, because they couldn't get Food Network shows like Is It Cake or The Floor is Lava, all those experimental things that probably shouldn't work but have worked fairly well. Of course, Netflix also canceled a bunch of those experiments, and that lost them a lot of fandom also. So I wouldn't want to see Amazon do that. Yeah, the Santa Clarita Diet was one I liked. And they canceled that abruptly without giving it a proper ending. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says the Fallout 4's free next-gen update is available for PlayStation Plus collection owners. Which is to say everything is now fixed. Square Enix has canceled several games. I don't think I even need to say looks like they have. It's been pretty much confirmed at this point, stating that they'll be more selective in the future. They've canceled these games, and they are going to write off the production costs of the early pre-production of those games as a major, I think it was somewhere around, yeah, here it goes, content abandonment loss is what they're calling it, for $141 million. Which I don't know if that's legitimate budgeting, because the fact that they've scrapped projects doesn't really mean anything. You could take whatever thoughts and work was done on those games and come back and use them again. It's not like you're, well, maybe it is some kind of weird Hollywood thing where they're destroying the files to legally say they couldn't get that work back. But the thoughts in the heads of the developers as they were working on that project, like, some of that money went into the employees' heads and their brains and their thoughts, and you can't destroy that. But I guess that doesn't matter for accounting. There is also something I've noticed here on this picture. Are these bottles of alcohol, or is this some kind of weird award that just happens to look like bottles of alcohol? The rest of these awards on the shelf look like awards, certainly. And I think this is a BAFTA, if I were to guess. But yeah, I don't know if this isn't just alcohol, which that would be a fairly Japanese thing. Let's just have alcohol ready to go. Back here is a little kitchenette sink area, but nothing too suspicious there. I assume this is some kind of coffee machine. But yeah. Square Enix management still feels like at best all we can do is hope that they are changing their ways and getting better. But at worst, it feels like they may just be going around in circles. And we may very well have them only release a few games every now and then that they think are going to be really successful. And I personally don't even know what I want from Square Enix. I guess they still have to make Final Fantasy games. That's about all I could say. Is that they should make Final Fantasy games every now and then and continue to make remakes on that. There are definitely some things that would be bad, in my opinion, if they have been cancelled. I think Square Enix was working on that new Kingdom Hearts game. So if that new Kingdom Hearts game that was barely teased has now been cancelled, people would probably be upset about that, by that. Although we knew so little about it, you really wouldn't have been too hyped around it. If they canceled the third in the Final Fantasy VII Reboot trilogy, if that game was canceled, people would be incredibly upset by that. And so almost certainly that's not the case. If they canceled Final Fantasy 16 DLC or Final Fantasy 8, some form of Final Fantasy 17 in development, people probably wouldn't be too upset about that. If they were going to get rid of the Final Fantasy Online MMO content, I think you'd lose some fans that way too. But yeah, I would think I would want to see Square Enix have some new projects in development that are just completely different, not fantasy games, not something that we've already seen from them. I'd like to see them try something different, but clearly they're not going to do that. They're just going to be incredibly picky, releasing Final Fantasy games every now and then, and probably nothing else. So the Returnal creators teased an announcement, and Video Games Chronicle wrote an editorial here that says 3 years later, Returnal remains a PS5's most special exclusive, which I thought Returnal came to PC, but I'm not sure it ever did. That certainly would explain why I've never really had any motivation to play it. Is if it has just always been PC. But anyways, they teased a new announcement, and I'll just spoil it now. The new announcement that they teased is a graphic novel. So it's seemingly not coming to any other consoles. And not getting a remaster or doing anything that would interest an actual game game developer. Now this is weird. OBS put out, it's incredibly useful to creators to have tools and streaming software all in one place. They're super excited for Streamlabs to bring that unified experience to OBS Studio with their official plugin. So the story around Streamlabs is that they were selling a software called Streamlabs OBS. OBS basically had to threaten to sue Streamlabs for releasing Streamlabs OBS and confusing it for the official open broadcast software program, particularly since all Streamlabs was doing was taking an open source project and putting their own extra tweaks and covers in it. And now they finally worked through that unpleasantness, and now you apparently can just install a plugin into the actual OBS Studio and get what seems like most, if not everything, from Streamlabs integrated. Which I probably should investigate that a little bit more. A lot of people like to use Streamlabs because it just made things easier. OBS itself is slightly more open, slightly more professional. But yeah, I could see if using this plugin made dual streaming to Twitch and YouTube a little bit easier, getting the chat better docked and integrated. This is another example too, reminding me of how much I've changed how my OBS looks compared to the default layout. But yeah, it seems like everybody is happy now and working together with Streamlabs. But I would also say you need to question whether you need to do Streamlabs. I'm not sure if there isn't actually some extra fee or cost involved around using Streamlabs, and the cost may just be more CPU and GPU processing power that's unnecessary. Moving on, Assassin's Creed Mirage has received a later than expected release date for iOS devices, June 6. Assassin's Creed Mirage on iOS devices. It'll be interesting to see if there's any real enthusiasm around that release or not. Probably not. Apparently, Rise of the Ronin is already outselling the Neo series, says Koei Tecmo. Which, yeah, I confuse several of these games together. Several of these Japanese games together. Probably should play at least one of them to just keep the name straight in my head. Not like I have the extra time to do that though. And then Video Games Chronicle has a feature here where the Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is a brilliant introduction to Sega's wonderfully wheeled RPG series. So you would say this is probably a promo type review without an actual review score, or just an advertisement in the form of a feature, whatever you want to call it. Target launch months for Xbox 2024 games have seemingly been revealed, including Starfield Shattered Space, Call of Duty Avowed, Flight Simulator, and Indiana Jones. All of these dates are going to be announced fairly quickly, officially anyways though, so it doesn't matter. I guess maybe Indiana Jones could be something people would be kind of interested in, but I doubt it. It's almost certainly Call of Duty is going to be the next big thing. Avowed and Flight Simulator probably not. Kyokin Interactive lays off its entire staff. We already talked about this time from Komatsu. And again, there's some inconsistency there where one news reporter said it was the entire development team. Here they're saying it's the entire staff. The entire staff, I think, would include management, and that would mean you're just shutting down the company completely. And you never know, you might have still a cleaning lady or a secretary that wouldn't be laid off if you were laying off the development team or publishing department or publisher or HR, things like that. Those wouldn't be part of the development team. Yep. And so here we have Video Games Chronicle saying that they have laid off its whole team, which would again seem to indicate that it is everybody except for the founders. And they are very much getting ahead of it instead of just trying to stay trying to sound like they're tried their best to not lay off people, because certainly you could have a very negative reaction to this and just say, oh, they're just being greedy and firing everybody, and then going to Kickstarter to try and fund things. Inherently, this is a management failure, though, because they said they've tried everything, but then their plan is to do a Kickstarter and rebuild brick by brick. Why didn't you just come to Kickstarter earlier? Why didn't you come out on that Kickstarter and say, we're running out of money in 6 months. If we don't get funded, we're going to have to shut down the company. That's a pretty good sales pitch for Kickstarter, to say, hey, either you fund us now or everybody gets laid off. It doesn't make any sense to say, I've laid off everybody, now fund me, so I might hire them back on. Yep. Managers, one of the things they need to do, management in general, one of the things they need to do is see what's coming as far as finances and look ahead and not just be paying bills on a month-to-month basis, which it feels like that's exactly what they were doing. Like, if you don't have 6 months of salary in your bank, then you're in trouble, I would say, as a video game company, even a small one. And there's a lot of companies like that. I would think more outside of games than in, but there's a lot of companies there that just straight up don't pay their employees on time because they don't have enough money and they're not making enough profit, or they're wasting the money some way. Moving on, there are some new Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud that have been announced. This includes Little Kitty Big City, that's one game, Kona 2 Brume, that's the second game, and Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, that's the third game. The Brothers A Tale of Two Sons remake also doesn't seem like it's going to get any more hype around it, which frankly it probably didn't deserve any more hype around it for just being a remake of an old game that wasn't that big of a deal in the first place. Let's see. We have Gamatsu's coverage of the same story. Square Enix is going to record an extraordinary loss of 22.1 billion yen, roughly 141 million US dollars, in content abandonment losses following a revised development approach. Square Enix is going to be more selective and focused in the allocation of development resources. Yeah, and they've changed the management a little bit at Square Enix, so it's probably the best time in which the new management can do this and say, well, all of this money really is the fault of the people in charge before me. And then here's the Housemarque teased Returnal announcement, being a graphic novel. A Returnal art book has also been announced. Yeah. Which that definitely tells me Housemarque is probably out of ideas or out of money. That this is what they're doing, because this is the kind of stuff that you would have either released as part of a pre-order bundle for a new game, or you would have released as part of a pre-order bundle for the first game. And then Todd Howard claims that Starfield console mod support is still coming. Apparently the Starfield creation kit is already in the hands of some modders. Like, looking at the screenshot as I'm playing Fallout New Vegas, this is really what stands out to me as the problem. Like, one of the very first things I did in Fallout New Vegas is I saw a bunch of pre-war books that hadn't been burned or destroyed on shelves, and I collected a whole bunch of them thinking, oh, at some point I'm going to need those, and turn them into some kind of quest giver, which was exactly what happened in Fallout 3. And very quickly I realized there's a ton of those books all throughout the world, and it's not worth carrying them and collecting them. My point being here that these Bethesda games just have too much stuff. Now, if this is a bookshelf and the books are there and you can't pick them up or interact with them, then fine, I'm wrong at that point. But just looking in the background of the screen is a very, very nicely decorated room. But if there's even a single item in this room that you can pick up and take, that is going to feed that hoarder mentality. Visually, sure, the faces look slightly better, but honestly, the faces should look way better for the amount of difference between New Vegas's release date and Starfield's release date. Of course, none of that really has to do with mod support, and honestly, if Starfield did get mod support, I don't expect it's going to get that many interesting mods. There's really not that many content mods for any of the Bethesda games. It's always just improve the game so it crashes less, improve the lighting, improve the graphics, textures, make the characters have clean faces, make the ladies more pretty, and then you get into the vast majority of the mods, which are just sex mods, which then are so drastically different from the base game that kind of content really just doesn't even work. Like, it's not like there's mods in there that I know of, at least, that just add romances to it and there happens to be sex scenes. It's almost always like, let's create an entire dungeon and have orgies, and it just gets too hardcore too fast and out of the narrative theming that you would have in the game otherwise. I'm not even sure you can get married in Starfield and marry your companions. I don't think you can do it in Fallout either. So it's kind of weird that features are not even being carried over from one game to the other. Okay. So that is that. And that was 2 hours. So now let's go through all the games that came out on Steam. I had to run my macro a second time, so I may very well have already made YouTube shorts on a lot of these games. I also tried to spend a few moments to see how I would adjust these switching of these images so that they would go through this showcase wheel faster, because ideally what I'd like it to do is just go from here to here to here to here at that speed, if not slightly faster. That way I'm not having to just hit this button over and over again. The problem there is I'm going to probably need to install an extension to inject some JavaScript and catch and possibly even proxy JavaScript to make it really work, and honestly that may not be worth it. there may be an easier way to do this, just to have a macro going through all of the games anyways. Yeah, if this is April 26th, I probably went way too far back. And so, I imagine the majority of these games, I'm still not sure why the macro breaks sometimes. Like, I'm not sure why any of them break. Frankly, that there's just an inherent instability in running macros that work on websites, that web pages can be changed at any time, or could just download wrong even and have slightly different issues or different elements to them. Yeah. So I'm trying to go through and get to one I don't recognize. And one of the ways to determine whether I have seen these games is to see if I stop seeing ones that have follow list button clicked on them. Jesse Cox is a YouTuber who maybe really doesn't have any relevance, but I follow him every now and then, and he made a video as far as the rise of adult games. Adult games meaning sex games on Steam, and he really didn't have too much to say there. It is definitely more of just, here's a brief reminder of what has happened over the past few years and where Valve has settled down into their own decisions as far as what adult games they will allow on Steam and what games they won't, with Valve being mostly under the opinion of letting anything on Steam as long as it's a real game and as long as it doesn't have like moe anime style that would have characters being interpreted as being particularly young, which is the only thing that we've seen some censorship on, and it's not even been that much. It's one game every quarter or so. Now, I still would be an advocate for no censorship, since there's really no good way to quantify what should be censored. I don't think we're ever going to have Valve agree to that. But I almost would give this a chance if I saw an actual dinosaur in any of these screenshots. This is literally just backgrounds. But yeah, there isn't as much of a story to tell there as I think Jesse Cox would have wanted to tell. Other than, yes, there was one last attempt at clutching at pro-censorship pushes by people who frankly don't play video games in the first place and are just anti-video games for their own political agendas. And that one last attempt failed pretty miserably because there was a lot more gamers who reviewed games positively and played them and purchased them to show that they voted with their dollar and that they wanted those adult games on Steam. And inherently that is still the case, is that when there are these adult games coming out on Steam. They don't even have to be particularly good quality games, and they will get reviewed fairly high. Now, there still is that weird split between video games that have adult content and that they are there to titillate and entertain, where every other video game is there to simply entertain, and there's still a massive amount of garbage games that don't get reviewed, and don't get reviewed positively. And I think there is probably some room for a system that could be fair. My thought being that if a game is on Steam Direct and you paid $100 to list a game, that should be a reoccurring annual fee or something, or it should be more of a gamble at some level. This game is weird, this Shorewood Extreme. I don't know how this game got into my library. It must have been a game that was just free at some time, but SteamDB says it is lowest price has been $16.99. So yeah, I have no idea how I got this game. It's just not even a game I would have gotten. And it's not like people have the opportunity to just gift you games and you would automatically accept free games from random people. I imagine as a video game critic there might be a few companies that would try that. So the only thing I could think is that there must have been a completely different game with a completely different ID, and they may have just swapped it around. Like, this is a very weird one. And it's not even one I think I would highlight. So yeah, I have no idea why that game is in my inventory. It's not like I haven't set up a family share or anything yet. I never got that working, and didn't really experiment with it much. So it's not like somebody else in a shared family thing also would have bought it. And that is an interesting question in general, as far as if you do have a family share, will you get a warning when you go to a link that somebody else in your family share already owns that game, or would it just tell you to buy it again? I wouldn't be surprised if it just tells you to buy it again. Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, back to my thought. Yeah. If you paid $100 for Steam Direct, I think that there probably should be a number of sales factor to say you must sell $100 worth of games, so that Valve gets it probably should be something higher than that. If Valve is taking 30% on a Steam Direct listed game, then it should be that Valve needs to get $100 also from that Steam Direct fee, so that Valve is getting at least $200 to justify keeping it on for a long time. Otherwise, Steam Direct should be 6 weeks to at most 6 months, at which point games should disappear and be removed. And that threat isn't really much different from what is happening now, because a game that has been out for 6 months that nobody knows will just not be shown, or nobody's going to come back and play an old game that has 0 reviews or a bunch of negative reviews. But by just having that element, this is a weird game, spanking characters on the butt to project them forward, apparently. But yeah, just having that threat that you very possibly will lose money if your game doesn't sell well enough, would probably scare off a good number of garbage asset flippers, and it would give Valve an opportunity to just kind of curate and clean up old garbage asset flip games on Steam. Here we have another one of these visual novel type games that has the characters in tight suits, and definitely feels like there would be some uncensored patch somewhere for a game like this. And yeah, this is another example of a game that probably should be in the adult section. As another issue certainly is that Valve just needs to better address the adult section, promoting it to people who want to see it and hiding it better from people who don't want to see it. And a good way to do that almost certainly would be to have a kids.steam.com, just a kid-friendly version of Steam that is heavily curated. And that would be a great way for Steam to also just learn how to curate without irritating the audience, because nobody's going to complain if the curation, if the censorship is heavily handed in a kids.steam.com. They could very much limit it down to a small group of people. They could introduce a new fee where you have to pay an extra $100, if not maybe even $1,000, to have your game evaluated to be in the kids section. And that probably would pay for itself if you did that. That way, if there were dishonest people trying to get their games in the kids section, you'd be taking their money and making them poorer would be the hope, and making them less likely to do that a second time. Here we have a game called Bloody Feet, which is just a beat 'em up game with 3D CGI characters. Weirdly, though, there is no blood in this game, or blood on feet, and it definitely seems like this is more a fetish game than anything else being tagged with sexual content and being one of these Chinese fake porn type games. Chess-like. That might be interesting. Although it may be nothing. No, I haven't seen too many furry games recently. I don't know why I'm putting some of these on the follow list though. That's another thing. Every one of these streams really is starting to get more and more to be repetitive, where I'm just reminding myself that I'm not making any progress on some things. I do try on some things sometimes, but yeah, everything I've built breaks and needs more maintenance. As far as all the macros, and the follow list in general needs constant maintenance. Yeah, guess that one has a release date now. Snow Reach. It's mixed reviewed. Free-to-play online PvP game. Front Mission Remake, I guess, has a release date now. So we're almost done, if we're on April 30th, or closer to being done. There's still something. Whitewater rafting in VR is something that actually makes some sense for VR. Something that is very dangerous to do in real life that you could simulate in VR to either become more skilled and more safe in doing it in real life, or to fully replace it and never do it in real life. Major problems with whitewater rafting is you just don't know what the state of the water is going to be, and so there might be rocks where you aren't expecting rocks. There might be places where you'll just sink and get turned over and drown. This is some weird Ukrainian game, but the weird visuals here are so unique. I would be wrong to not highlight it and see if it catches some people's attention. We're seeing a decent number of non-English games today also. That number has ever increased as we start to see more and more Japanese game publishers and developers being willing to publish their games on Steam instead of trying to publish it on their own individual websites. Of course, there's a slight backlash that might also happen too, in that credit card companies have started to try and Western credit card companies have started to try and pressure some of the online stores in Japan out of selling certain items or certain types of content, mostly adult content with anime girls, moe characters that the Western credit card companies don't want to be associated with, that may be interpreted as being young. And so there's this Western financials company censorship that is happening, and there is a beginning of a pushback to that, in that some of those Japanese stores are now just saying we're not going to use those credit card companies. Swift is one of the payment processors in, yeah, I say credit card companies, but it's really payment processors. So inherently that might just create this sentimentality amongst Japanese people that they just won't list their products on more Western websites, which Steam is a Western website, so it might get caught up into that mentality. And yeah, so here we have a mostly negative game, but I want to highlight it anyways, just because visually on the screenshots it looks interesting. But I guess that also highlights how screenshots can hide quite a bit from how a game actually might play. And I generally do trust user reviews on Steam more than I would trust random reviewers. Yeah, I really don't have any reason to be listening to Jeff Gerstmann at this point. I don't like his presentation style. I don't think he's gotten any better in what feels like a year since he left Giant Bomb. I don't think he got any better for years when he was running Giant Bomb. I don't agree with his opinions. I don't think his opinions are valid enough, even if I didn't agree with them, to listen to. Whereas if he was explaining his position and it felt like a valid position, even if I disagreed with it, I might stay with it and listen to him anyways. And I never got into listening to Nextlander. Yep. And in fairness, that's just 4 people off the top of my head of a long list of people who used to be mainstream video game critics or mainstream video game journalists. And here's another butt game. Is there some butt theme going on today? Is April all about butts or May all about butts? So this is like a pusher game, but boy does it not look like a pusher game. But yeah, there is an incredibly long list of people who at one time I would have thought I respected their opinions, that I just don't really respect their opinions anymore. Adam Sessler, perhaps the oldest example of that. And I guess that highlights that we've improved our, as gamers, we've heard more voices, and we've realized, and we've been able to play more games ourselves and form our own opinions instead of just being led around by the nose by, well, here's one that looks like it should be in the adult section. Bikini Hunter Attack in Bikini Army. Yeah, it's gonna be a no. Yeah, back in the day when I was watching G4, that's a prime example of, there was a bunch of games that I wouldn't have had PCs to play them, or they would have been on consoles I didn't have to play them, and I would have just religiously believed whatever G4 or X-Play was reviewing and was saying about the games, whether they were accurate or not. Who knows? And before G4, it would have been Nintendo Power for me, reading Nintendo Power and believing all the hype, which that was just pure propaganda and advertisement as far as Nintendo Power. And I just don't think there are kids these days that are reading like Game Informer and taking that as gospel, or kids who are listening to specific mainstream video reviewers. They might be following people on Twitch, and they might be following, or YouTubers telling them if games are good. But if kids are doing that, very often I think they are not even playing the games themselves. Yeah, I just don't think you would have called those tastemakers in the past, who were convincing people to like things and make things popular. And I think we have thankfully gotten past that point where you just don't need and you can't have tastemakers in the game industry anymore, with perhaps a few exceptions. Like maybe Captain Sparkles could still convince a bunch of people to play a new game if he plays it, but that's about it. Nobody at if G4 had succeeded in rebooting, nobody at that new G4 would have convinced people to play games. Which, by the way, the Completionist put out yet another video, this time covering Spirit Tracks, completely just not mentioning the whole controversy around him collecting money for charities and then not really spending any of that money or giving it to any charities for years. Now, on that point, nobody else is making any new accusations against him, so I guess what was said is probably as much truth as we will ever get. And yeah, I imagine he's just not going to run any more charities or be involved. He's just going to continue to make footage and hope people forget it. If anything, I would say the bigger problem with the Completionist is he's just kind of covering old games, and his style of covering games from a completionist perspective is niche, to say the least. It's not the way most people, I think, would want to play a video game, and it's not a good reviewing style because he is so committed to these games. He doesn't really have a review system that would allow him to say a game is garbage, don't play it at all. Although he does have a skip it review system set option. Right, so that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to, because I imagine for a couple of reasons that may have taken longer. But yeah, I should be at this point a lot quicker. So we got the Steam DB 24-hour peaks, PUBG Battlegrounds in the 3rd spot, Fallout 4 in the 9th spot, Helldivers 2 in the 11th spot, Call of Duty in the 13th spot, Manor Lords in the 14th spot. It's probably time to start talking about a new Monster Hunter game. Monster Hunter World doing fairly well. I almost wonder if a game like this might be a good balance to like Fallout New Vegas, because one of the things I'm definitely missing there is I thought I'd just be shooting a lot more people, and I just am not. It's smaller groups of people, and on very easy they die fairly quickly. And there definitely was a section there where there was a bunch of enemies, but they all got crammed into a staircase, and so there was 6 or 7 people all just crammed together in a staircase that I could then mow down. Fallout 76 is in the 32nd spot. It's kind of shocking that it's even there. Yeah. There may very well be a no accounting for taste on some of these games too. That just the hype. I think the hype is almost certainly making something like Crab Game at a higher spot and Fallout 76 at a higher spot. Pal World probably still at a higher spot. But Pal World definitely benefiting by having a very overhyped launch. It is now at a much smaller number, much more reasonable number for that type of game. Fallout New Vegas is in the 48th spot. Fallout 1 and 2 not going to make it into the top 100 pretty obviously. So, and there's definitely an argument to maybe playing Witcher 3 a second time, but I don't think I'd ever have time to do that. It would be a nice comparison to something like Fallout 4 to say here's 2 games that were released somewhat close to each other, and here's one way in which they did a role-playing game versus the way Bethesda does role-playing games. Noticeably, Fallout 4 didn't, I don't think, learn enough from the Witcher series. Then our chart overall, if it is going to be helpful, is showing an overall trend downward for basically everything. And so I'll just keep that short and sweet and leave it at that. Early access Gray Zone Warfare is being advertised on Steam, and Steam has a farming fest, which let's just click on that and not bother to scroll down any further. Which, yeah, that Summer Games Fest just seems like it is not coming. You can get some cutesy emojis, which does imply that they are realizing a lot of these emojis are pointless and should only be given away for free instead of selling things. But yeah. I'm supposed to close something, not open something. Farming games are not likely what I want to play, and I'd say Dreamlight Valley is probably not a farming game. If Dreamlight Valley decided to just give up on adding any more content and lower the price a little bit, I might still consider buying it. But it's a weird system that is subject to change on a whim, is what it feels like. It makes me hesitant to engage with it. I wonder how many kids actually like farming games, or if it isn't just the type of games that are for more obsessive adults. Yeah, and I question if some of these just have farming tags on them when they really shouldn't. So yeah, I'm still waiting for the summer sale. Still trying to wait and see if there's possibly going to be any refurbs of the OLED screens, which I did hear that the OLED screens, when you try to install Windows on the Steam Deck, have worse drivers than the LCD screens do, which, okay, that would just be another thing that would need work. Yeah, but my big questions is, is there going to be a summer sale at all, and what would possibly be on sale, and what could I really afford since I already bought the Steam Deck. I'm a little surprised to see Pools still in the new and trending section, and Sandland, I'm happy to see is still in the new and trending section. Suppose if I just wanted to use Steam as a source for top new releases and not make YouTube shorts on all new games, that might be a thought. Like, if you just wanted to let Steam curate on your behalf, you could make individual shorts or videos around each of these games, and it wouldn't be an overwhelmingly long list of games. Yeah. But yeah, that's not something I would do. I've just got too much other things I'm always spending my time on. I'm not 100% sure they do this every month. Anyways. Alright, well, let's now burn through the headlines. I really am in danger of going too long and having to stop abruptly if I don't. So, Video Games Chronicle. Batman Arkham Shadow announced for VR ahead of a late 2024 release. A £200 Fallout TV show backpack is now available for pre-order. Tickets go on sale for Bit Summit Drift, Japan's leading indie games expo. So, yeah, Japan seems to be in a bit of a season for game announcements. I did find out that Evo Japan has happened relatively recently. That would explain why there were so many new characters announced for fighting games. I assume this Bit Summit series is not all just going to be racing games, and the Drift title may be unique for this one year. But yeah, we'll probably have some indie Japanese games talked about there, but it has been up until this point fairly uncommon for games to actually be announced for the first time at any event in Japan. Usually games get announced either directly via press releases, or they get announced for the first time as a surprise announcement in Western presentations. Steam Directs, not Steam Directs, Xbox Directs, PlayStation Directs, Nintendo Directs, things like that. Although, we could see that change at any point. There's that possibility. And we might even see some higher budget games get announced in a follow-up to Stellar Blade. Yeah, I can see a lot of indie developers thinking to themselves, why can't we be like Stellar Blade and make a AA, AAA game? And that's an interesting question in itself. Should Stellar Blade be considered a AAA budget game or a AA budget game? Like, I think it's probably crossing the line into being a AAA. Moving on, the Pokemon Company announces a new subsidiary, Pokemon Card D Studio Limited. It's important to point out that also a lot of these companies get formed in Japan so that they can do exactly one thing and then be dissolved as a way of, I think, limiting liability. That's why most limited corporations get formed, but also as a way of maybe gathering a lot of money and then shutting down and filtering the money to the parent companies without taking any of the liability if it fails and they go bankrupt. Moving on, Horizon Call of the Mountain director made redundant by Fire Sprite. Quote, "It's been a tough time over the past few months." Well, there's a very vocal anti-Horizon fan base at this point that are not happy with Horizon, and a fairly silent fan base of fans of Horizon. So I don't think anybody's going to champion the director of Call of the Mountain. That being said, I think Call of the Mountain is the VR game spinoff. So I would want to be kind of careful. Yeah, it is the PSVR 2 spinoff, and PlayStation VR 2 in particular is just not succeeding well enough. So this almost certainly has nothing to do with actual Horizon or Horizon Zero Dawn games, and more to do with just VR not selling well enough to be an actual business or industry. Pop culture mashup game Funko Fusion gets a September release date. Following delays, Sims rival Life by You is ready for June early access release. There is a decent argument to be made that since I don't want to try and play a bunch of Sims games, maybe playing a game like Life by You to contrast Sims would make sense. Although that's a very weak argument when I think about it, because in reality I just don't want to play Life by You either. I just don't want to play life simulation games. In the same way I don't want to play job simulation games. Why would I want to do something that I'm already having to do in the real world? Or do something that usually is incredibly boring? That's another argument. Diablo 4 Season 4 Loot Reborn overhauls many core game systems. Fallout 4's free next-gen update is now available for PlayStation Plus collection owners. Assassin's Creed Mirage receives later than expected release date for iOS devices. Target launch months for Xbox 2024 games have seemingly been revealed. Deliver Us Mars studio Kyoken has laid off its whole team. Xbox Game Showcase and Redacted Direct announced for June 9th. This is a direct where we're gonna probably get some Call of Duty announcement, is the assumption. Yeah. What would be surprising, I guess, is if a Call of Duty game was announced and released on the same day. That would be about the biggest announcement there. Or if it was announced for PlayStation, or if it was announced for PC first, or if it was announced and it was some weird spin-off game in the Call of Duty universe. New Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud have been announced. Housemarque's teased Returnal announcement is a graphic novel. Rise of Ronin's launch sales are surpassing Neo, according to Koei Tecmo. Square Enix looks to have cancelled games, stating it will be more selective in the future. Hi-Fi Rush has been rated for Nintendo Switch in Europe. Starfield console mod support is still coming, according to Todd Howard. Starfield's Shattered Space story expansion is launching this fall. Todd Howard says Bethesda is focused on finding ways to increase its output. New Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer maps have been showcased. The first episode of Knuckles' TV show is available on YouTube for free. EA shares the first F124 gameplay ahead of next month's release. Remedy's Control multiplayer game has entered full production. That's interesting. I don't know how that's really going to work though. They say the core loop is engaging and the game brings a unique Remedy angle to the genre. But yeah. The problem I had with Control is that the enemies were boring and repetitive. The shooting mechanics were alright, so if they could bring better and more varied shooting mechanics and have more varied enemies, I think that might work fairly well. But I don't know how much SCP weirdness you'd actually get in a multiplayer Control game. That is, I guess, going to be part of the question. Tencent has increased its shareholding in Remedy to almost 15%. And that headline, compared to the last headline, might be connected more than we realize, and that maybe Tencent is influencing the developers of Control to make more multiplayer games that would potentially be profitable in the long run, or have more people paying microtransactions in the long run, where we really haven't seen a lot of DLC or microtransactions in the Control company's game. I forget the name of the company, Remedy. Yeah, we really haven't seen that in Remedy games yet, and so if we start to see that shift, it is reasonable to question if that isn't Tencent's influence or not. Which, remember, when Tencent started to invest in Remedy, there was a lot of comments being made saying Tencent had no influence and was not really going to influence the company. Of course, that can change or can just be inaccurate at any point. Walmart is testing a Roblox feature that lets players buy physical goods in-game. I wonder if this is specific items or just any item at all, because it certainly would be weird if you could just buy like Plan B, condoms, bleach, things that beer, alcohol. If you could just buy anything that might be at a Walmart. Walmart sell guns still, or bullets. Yeah. But Roblox players, kids potentially buying bullets and having them delivered. I don't know if you can actually deliver bullets from Walmart. You probably can't. But yeah, there's some weirdness there, to say the least. I would be surprised if you could even buy games. So you get enough Robux and then you buy a different video game and play a different video game from instead. Square Enix is working on a fix for Final Fantasy XVI bug that prevents game progress. Street Fighter VI 4th DLC character Akuma is coming in May. Right, so that's going to bring us to the Gamatsu articles now. Hunter x Hunter Nin X Impact adds Ginthru. I have no idea who that character is, but whatever. DNA Digital Production changes its name to Pokemon Card D Studio. Hypercharge Unboxed for Xbox One and Series launches May 31st. Features crossplay with the PC version, which is, let's see what that is reviewed at. This is from 2020. Yeah, it's on my wish list. This is one of these toy soldier games that seems to be more varied than just little plastic green army men. Now with a story campaign, which would be the only thing I would actually play. Earth Defense Force 6 launches July 25th in the West. I think we probably knew that was coming, but now we have an actual release date. Star Wars Hunters launches June 4th for Switch and smartphones, it looks like. I have no idea who this character is. These may be all relatively new characters. They're a little too hardcore, I think, for a Star Wars universe. Just way too many guns, way too many scowling faces, way too much of extreme costuming. Third-person competitive arena combat game. So it's just, I guess, player versus player. Maybe something like Fortnite or something like Overwatch with Star Wars characters, which that general concept would make sense, but also when you say with Star Wars characters, you generally mean characters that people can recognize, not just fake clones of characters that you might recognize. I imagine this is not Chewbacca. I imagine this is not anybody you know, or this isn't anyone you know. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, an Ideal World trailer is available on Gamatsu. Ginso Manage is coming to the West for Switch and PC. I assume that's how you pronounce that word, is Manage. This is a young maiden otome visual novel, which it does definitely seem like we are back into the process of having more of these announced. Seems like there was a couple weeks they took off as far as announcing visual novels, and now they're back to full power. The Land Beneath Us launches May 13th. See that on Steam. Open world RPG Dread Delusion for PC launches May 14th. Oh yeah, that was another thing. I keep reminding myself of ideas, and then what happens is I totally forget what I say as soon as I stop streaming. I just get busy doing something else and forget everything I'm reminding myself to do. Like, because I was supposed to program the macro to just go ahead and open all these Steam links immediately after, if there is a link. Funko Fusion launches September 13th for the PS4 and 5, the Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. I wish sometimes when I'm reading these long sentences I wouldn't lose the pacing of how I'm saying things. I start to drawl or speed faster. Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero Master and Apprentice trailer and screenshots are available on Gamatsu. I really should play the Dragon Ball Fighter Z game before it becomes completely irrelevant. Xbox Games Showcase 2024 followed by ... Direct set for June 9th. Kyokin Interactive lays off its entire staff. Xbox Game Pass adds Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, Kona 2 Broomy, Little Kitty Big City, and more in early May. This game, Little Kitty Big City, probably heavily inspired by the game Stray, and probably deserves a little bit more coverage than it got. Yeah, I never got around to playing Stray either. There's a long list of games I never got around to playing, come to think of it. Cozy exploration game Into the Emberlands announced for PC. Yeah, this idea of cozy, well, its listing is missing here on Steam. Maybe they typed in the wrong information. The idea of calling games cozy at this point, I think, is either going to be annoying to me because I'm old and unwilling to learn new things, or going to be very valuable to gamers in general as a just new way of describing games and making games instead of making everything be hyper violent. Cozy games could be a genre that would be very appealing to add to the game's styles that already exist. Pine Hearts adds a Switch version and launches May 23rd. Already had a PC version. This is another game you could describe as looking cozy, although I'm not 100% sure what they mean when they say cozy. Square Enix to record an extraordinary loss of 22.1 billion yen in content abandonment losses. Shiren the Wanderer, the mystery dungeon of Serpent Coil Island's first major content update, is now available. I remember them talking and promoting this game quite a bit. I'm not sure what platforms it's on. It seems like it's a Switch exclusive from the looks of it on Gamatsu. Sci-fi 2.5D adventure RPG Beyond Galaxyland has been announced for all consoles and PC. This is kind of an interesting art style. Feels kind of like a 90s cartoon feel to it. Although in reality, if you went back and looked at the 90s cartoon animations, those are often absolute garbage. Almost all of them are terribly animated at incredibly low frame rates. Humanity is coming to Xbox One and Series on May 30th. This was on Steam previously, and it was received very positively, but being a weirder game, it didn't get enough coverage to really become relevant. Vampire Survivors version 1.10 laboratory update is now available, which I guess that highlights that Vampire Survivors is still getting updates and still seemingly worth playing instead of trying to play any of the clones. Although Wedding Witch, if you want to play an adult sex version of Vampire Survivors with some adult scenes in it, is your close second to Vampire Survivors. I don't think any of the other clones really matter or should be played. Dungeon of Hindenburg launches July 18th. Let's see. Increasingly, because I'm not going to do any of the follow-up, this is an interesting environment of a game. Putting things on the follow list is becoming less and less helpful now that I'm not doing consistent follow list cleanup. Gamera Games announces new titles coming to Xbox and PC Game Pass. Several games, apparently. The Rewinder, Firework, Depersonalization, and Kepler, and Volcano Princess. I don't know any of these games, and I don't think any of these games have been released on Steam. And I'd have a hard time telling you which one was which. Firework. Firework, I bet, is this guy, this game. Depersonalization, maybe this, probably this. Kepler, Volcano Princess. Volcano Princess here? Kepler here? Or the Rewinder here? Like, yeah. No, this is the Rewinder. Look at the description. So this is probably depersonalization. And this might be Kepler. Or it still might be Volcano Princess, who knows? That is a weird collection of games I've never heard of. And so these are either brand new games going uniquely exclusively to Game Pass and PC Game Pass instead of going to Steam where I'd expect them to go, or they are games that have been sold on a different, like, direct web store, and that's why I haven't heard of them. Yeah, they look a little too good to be itch.io type games though. Anyways, moving on. Kaizen Gameworks announces open world mascot management crime drama Promise Mascot Agency for all consoles and PC, which this is quite the description of a game. Which, yeah, I guess I can say that looks weird. That's about all I can say. Might be a good weird, but it definitely looks weird. Hangry has added an Xbox One and Series versions. This is a weird snack and slash RPG is how it describes itself. And yeah, I don't think I need to make another YouTube short on this game just because it's adding an Xbox version. Trying to save myself some time there. Tales of Iron 2 Whiskers of Winter gameplay reveal trailer is available on Gematsu. Q Games announces a co-op puzzle game All You Need Is Help for the PS5, Xbox One, and Series Switch and PC. Which PC in this case seems to be Steam, but they don't have a link yet. Farah, The Sundered Tribes adds a PS5 and Xbox Series version. So, if these are already on the fall list and they're just adding new versions, again, to be consistent, I'm not going to make another YouTube short on it. Sulfur adds an Xbox One and Series version. So it definitely feels like there was an announcement here in which Xbox just is announcing a bunch of things that have already been announced for PC, which we still have that as a weirdness, that you may have PC games announcing themselves and then you may have an Xbox Direct to announce the Xbox versions of those same PC games, which just creates too many announcements, which is always a problem as far as video game news is concerned. Times and Galaxy launches in June. This seems to be for basically everything. Yeah. And should I be making YouTube shorts when the date hasn't been updated? That is a thought I'll have to think about, because that could reduce the number of YouTube shorts I make also if the date gets announced via Gamatsu, but they don't update the Steam page. Maybe it's not worth making another YouTube short around it for that reason. Stampede Racing Royale adds Xbox Series version and launches in early access this summer. The one thing is I want to make sure these games are on the fall list, so I know I've made at least one YouTube short around them, which some of these are not on the fall list, which I assume means I haven't seen them before. Keylocker turn-based cyberpunk action adds an Xbox version and launches this summer. This definitely feels like something I haven't seen before. Yeah, that character design would have caught my eye. I would remember that. Almost done. Lost Records Bloom and Rage Lo-Fi Summer trailer is available on Gamatsu. This is from Don't Nod. Feels like yet another Life is Strange type game. Unreliable narrative-driven adventure game Symptom has been announced for Xbox Series and PC. Interesting art style. Commando's Origin gameplay teaser trailer is available on Gamatsu. Palworld New Pals update has been announced. And 33 Immortals Fighting Lucifer trailer is available on Gamatsu. Astro Blade of the Mammoth launches May 30th. And shoot 'em up action roguelike game Rising Heat has been announced for PC. And we're going to go ahead and just skip the GameDeveloper.com stuff because I think we've covered enough of that. And I'm going to just rush and finish the show here. That's going to be it for this show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.